What happens if Russia stops gas to Europe completely? Imagine waking up to a winter where millions of homes across Europe struggle to stay warm, factories shut down, and electricity prices skyrocket overnight. For decades, Europe has relied heavily on Russian natural gas to power industries, heat homes, and keep its economy running. But if that supply suddenly stopped, the consequences could trigger one of the biggest energy crises in modern history. Energy shortages, rising inflation, and economic instability could spread across the continent within weeks. The big question is, could Europe survive without Russian gas, and what would it mean for the global economy? For many decades, Europe has depended heavily on natural gas imported from Russia to run its economies, heat homes, and power major industries. Before the war in Ukraine began in 2022, around 35–40% of Europe's natural gas supply came directly from Russia through massive pipelines such as Nord Stream, Yamal-Europe pipeline, and routes crossing Ukraine. Countries like Germany, Italy, Hungary, and Austria built their energy systems around this relatively cheap and stable supply. If Russia suddenly stopped sending gas to Europe completely, the first and most immediate impact would be a massive energy crisis. Natural gas prices across Europe would skyrocket within days. Electricity prices would surge, and many industries that rely heavily on gas, such as chemical plants, fertilizer factories, steel production, and glass manufacturing, could be forced to slow down production or temporarily shut down. This would not only cause job losses, but also disrupt global supply chains, since Europe is one of the world's largest industrial centers. Households would also face serious consequences. In many European countries, natural gas is the main source for heating homes and producing electricity, especially during the winter months. Without Russian gas, governments might have to introduce emergency measures such as energy rationing, limiting heating in public buildings, or giving priority energy supply to hospitals and critical infrastructure. Consumers would see dramatically higher energy bills, which could push millions of people into energy poverty. Governments across the continent might need to spend billions on subsidies to protect citizens from extreme price increases. Political pressure would also rise because energy costs directly affect inflation, transportation prices, and food production. As a result, the energy crisis could trigger protests and political instability in several European countries. At the same time, the long-term effects would reshape Europe's entire energy strategy. The European Union has already started reducing its dependence on Russian energy by increasing imports of liquefied natural gas, LNG, from countries such as the United States, Qatar, and Norway. Europe is also rapidly investing in renewable energy like wind farms, solar power, and green hydrogen to replace fossil fuels. However, building new LNG terminals, pipelines, and renewable energy infrastructure takes time and requires hundreds of billions of dollars in investment. During this transition period, Europe could face years of high energy prices and slower economic growth. Interestingly, a complete gas cutoff would also hurt Russia itself. Europe has historically been the largest and most profitable market for Russian gas exports. If those exports stopped permanently, Russia would lose a huge portion of its energy revenue. Although Moscow is trying to redirect gas exports toward countries like China and expand new pipeline projects in Asia, building such infrastructure takes years and cannot immediately replace the European market. This means both sides would suffer economic consequences, but the global energy market would be permanently changed. In the long run, Europe would become far less dependent on Russian energy, while the geopolitical relationship between Russia and Europe would shift dramatically for decades to come.